Story 1. The Legend of the Chinese Zodiac.
A long, long time ago, the Jade Emperor wanted to find a means of measuring time, and so he organized a race and invited all the animals to take part. When they had all lined up on the bank of the river, the Emperor explained that to win the big prize, a permanent place in the Zodiac, they would have to be one of the first 12 to cross the swiftly flowing river and reach a designated spot on the opposite shore. Their order in the cycle would be decided by the order in which they finished the race. And so the race began. The cat wondered how she would get across if she was afraid of water. At the same time, the ox wondered how he would cross with his poor eyesight. The rat suggested that he and the cat jump onto the ox's back and guide him across. But as they were crossing the river, the rat snuck up behind the unsuspecting cat and pushed her into the water. Just as the ox came lumbering ashore, the rat jumped off and raced over the line first, closely followed by the ox. By the time the cat had managed to save herself from drowning and reach the finishing line, it was too late for her to win any place in her calendar, and so she vowed to be the enemy of the rat forever after. After the ox came the tiger. Out of breath, as she explained to the Emperor how difficult it had been to cross the river with the strong currents dragging her downstream all the time. But because she was so strong, she had eventually made it to shore, and so was named the third animal in the cycle. Just then, there was a flash of fur and whiskers, and out of nowhere appeared the rabbit. He explained that he had crossed the river by jumping onto a floating log that had at first moved rapidly downstream, but had then suddenly been washed ashore. Thus, he became the fourth animal in the Zodiac cycle. Coming in fifth place was the dragon, flapping his great wings and breathing fire into the air. The Emperor was very interested to know why such a great creature like the dragon, who could fly, hadn't managed to arrive first. The dragon explained that he had been close to finishing when he saw a poor, helpless rabbit clinging to a log that was being washed downstream. He therefore stopped and gave a mighty puff of breath to blow the log to the shore. By the time this good deed had been done, 4 of the other animals had already arrived. No sooner had the dragon reached the finish line than the sound of galloping hooves was heard, and the horse appeared. Hidden in the horse's mane was the snake, who hissed and moved just before the horse crossed the line. The horse got such a shock that she reared up, and before she could recover, the snake had slithered off her back and crossed the line in 6th place, beating the horse into 7th. Not long after that, the sheep, monkey, and rooster reached the bank of the river together. These 3 animals had helped each other all through the race. The rooster had found some logs tied together and invited the other 2 creatures to go with it. The sheep and the monkey had worked together to clear the weeds, pulled and pushed, and eventually managed to get to the other side. This cooperation greatly pleased the Emperor, and he promptly declared that the sheep was 8th, the monkey 9th, and the rooster 10th. Some time later, the dog arrived in 11th place. The Emperor expressed surprise that it had taken her so long, despite the fact she was a better swimmer than most of the other animals. The dog explained that it was precisely her love of the water that had delayed her. It had been so refreshing that she simply couldn't resist playing around for a while. Just as the Emperor was wondering if no other animal would reach the finish, an oink, oink, oink was heard, and the pig came waddling into view. To nobody's surprise, he related how he hadn't been able to resist the temptation of stopping and filling his belly with acorns. After that, he had felt the need for a nap, and had only woken up a short time before. And so the pig became the 12th and last animal of the Zodiac cycle.
Story 2. Dusklands.
The novel actually consists of two separate stories. The first one, the Vietnam Project, relates the gradual descent into insanity of its protagonist, Eugene Dawn. Eugene works for a US government agency responsible for the psychological warfare in the Vietnam War. However, his work on mythography and psychological operations is taking a heavy toll on him. His fall culminates in him stabbing his own son, Martin. The second story, the narrative of Jacobus Coetzee, which takes place in the 18th century, is an account of a hunting expedition into the then unexplored interior of South Africa. After crossing the Orange River, Jacobus meets with the Namaqua tribe to trade, but suddenly falls ill. He is attended to by the tribe and gradually recovers, only to get into a fight for which he is expelled from the village. His last slave dying on the way home, he returns alone, and later organizes a punitive expedition against the Namaqua. The narrative concludes with his execution of the slaves that deserted him on the previous journey and the massacre of the tribe. In the Heart of the Country. In the Heart of the Country, 1977, is a novel which delves into the complex relationships that form between the colonizer and the colonized. It takes place on a desolate farm in South Africa, told through the perspective of an intelligent yet meek European woman. She clashes with her father when he takes an African mistress, causing a rift that leads towards vengeance, violence, and a muddling of her own relationship with the Africans. Waiting for the Barbarians. The story is set in a small frontier town of a nameless empire. The town's magistrate is the story's main protagonist and narrator. His rather peaceful existence on the frontier comes to an end with the arrival of some special forces of the empire, led by a sinister Colonel Joel. There are rumours that the barbarians are preparing an attack on the empire. That is why Colonel Joel and his men conduct an expedition into the land beyond the frontier. They capture a number of barbarians, bring them back to town, torture them, kill some of them, and leave for the empire's capital in order to prepare a larger campaign against the barbarians. In the meantime, the magistrate becomes involved with a barbarian girl who was left behind, crippled and blinded by the torturers. Eventually, he decides to take her back to her people. After a life-threatening trip through the barren land, he returns to his village. Shortly thereafter, the empire's forces return, and the magistrate's own plight begins. Life and Times of Michael Kay. After her death, she is cremated and the ashes given to him. He vows to return them to her birthplace. He begins a long, arduous journey across the country to her childhood farm, sleeping rough and enduring many hardships along the way. The country is at war, and he sees many convoys going past. One of the soldiers ransacks his belongings and takes his money. Eventually, he reaches the place of his destination and finds the place deserted, the owners long gone. He scatters the ashes on the ground and takes up residence there. He kills goats and birds for food and drinks from the nearby dam. A member of the old family comes and, wanting to escape the war, hides in the farmhouse. Foe. Returning from Bahia, where she has been searching for a lost daughter, Susan Barton is put off the ship after a mutiny. She is accompanied only by the dead body of the captain whose mistress she had been. She swims ashore and finds herself on the island with Crusoe and Friday. Friday has been mutilated. He has no tongue. Who did this, where or how it happened, we are never told. After their rescue by a passing merchantman, Crusoe dies aboard the ship, and Susan and Friday are left to make their way to England. After she arrives in England, Susan drafts a memoir, The Female Castaway, and seeks out the author, Foe, to have her story told. Coetzee's novel comprises 4 parts. Beginning with Susan's memoir, it continues with a series of letters addressed to Foe, letters that do not reach him because he is hiding, trying to evade his creditors. The novel proceeds to an account of Susan's relationship with Foe and her struggle to retain control over the story and its meaning. It ends with a sequence spoken by an unnamed narrator, possibly standing for Coetzee himself, who revises the story as we know it and dissolves the narration in an act of authorial renunciation. Age of Iron. The novel depicts the agony of Mrs. Curran, a classically educated white woman. She lives in the Cape Town of the apartheid era, where she is slowly dying of cancer. Against a backdrop of violence by whites and blacks alike, Mrs. Curran remembers her past and her daughter, who left South Africa because of the situation in the country. The book is framed as an extended letter from the mother to her distant offspring. As the story progresses, she constructs a relationship of a different kind with Verkeuil, an old black man who happens upon her home. Coetzee brings together important themes in this book. The drama of a tragic end of life, the separation of mother and daughter, a strange friendship between diametrically opposed people, and the metaphor of decay from within, atop which is painted a picture of social and political tragedy unfolding in an undeveloped country. Disgrace. The novel tells the story of David Lurie, a professor of romantic literature at a technical university in Cape Town, South Africa, twice divorced and unsatisfied with his job. The disgrace comes when he has an affair with one of his students and is dismissed from his teaching position, after which he takes refuge on his daughter's farm in the Eastern Cape. Shortly after becoming comfortable with rural life, he is forced to come to terms with the aftermath of an attack on the farm in which his daughter is raped and he is brutally assaulted. Elizabeth Costello. In this novel, Elizabeth Costello, an aging Australian writer, travels around the world and gives lectures on topics including the lives of animals and literary censorship. In her youth, Costello wrote The House on Eccles Street, a novel that retells James Joyce's Ulysses from the perspective of his wife, Molly Bloom. Costello, becoming weary from old age, confronts her fame, which seems farther and farther removed from who she has become, and struggles with issues of belief, vegetarianism, sexuality, language, and evil. Slow Man. Slow Man tells the story of Paul Raymond, a man who loses part of a leg after a car accident. He becomes a wallflower, but one attracted to his Croatian nurse. It is obvious that they could never come together, and their interactions become awkward. It is not until the famed author Elizabeth Costello, the eponymous heroine of Coetzee's 2003 novel Elizabeth Costello, finds her way into Paul's life that he is able to become a stronger and fuller person. On a deeper and more meaningful level, the book is a discourse on the interrelationship between the literary author and the characters, and with reality.
Story 3. Coming back up.
So we're driving along, a road in the middle of nowhere. A few trees now and then on each side of the road. Mountains in the distance. There hasn't been a town for ages. And then you see this sign. Not really a proper sign at all. Just a piece of card with some words scribbled on it. Bungee jumping 5 kilometers. And an arrow pointing to the left. I can't even see a road going left. And there's certainly no sign of any bungee jumping. But you insist. The idea has taken you. You're crazy about it. You've always wanted to do bungee jumping. I know. You think I'm boring because I don't want to go. Go on, you insist. We don't even have to do the bungee jumping. We can just go there and see what's happening. It'll be interesting. As usual, you get your way. I give in and off we go along this dirt road for what seems much more than 5 kilometers to me. But then, after driving for ages, suddenly, out of nowhere, some trees appear, like a small wood. This must be the place, you say. The road narrows into just a path, so we pull over to the side of the road. I couldn't drive down there if I wanted to. As soon as we're out of the car, we can hear voices, people shouting and laughing. They sound like young people. They sound like they're having a good time. We slowly walk to where the noise and people are. In the middle of the wood, there's a group of about 20 people. The youngest are about 15 or 16, while some of them are perhaps in their late 20s. They look up and see us, then say hello to us. They're polite, friendly even, but I feel like we're interrupting a private party, gate-crashing something they're doing. Once there had been a river running through the middle of the forest, but now there was just a dry ditch. It doesn't matter. Nobody is interested in swimming. A metal bridge crosses the ditch. The bridge doesn't look too stable. I think the kids had built it themselves. There's a big group of the kids in the middle of the bridge. They're all leaning over and looking down into the ditch. They're all shouting and laughing. Another person is hanging from a long piece of elastic rope in the middle of the ditch. He is laughing like he is mad. The other people slowly pull him up to the bridge. As the guy comes to the top, he looks exhilarated and shocked, but also very, very happy. I look at you and can see what you're thinking. I want to do that, you say. I knew it. And you know what I want to say. Danger. Damage to internal organs. Safety procedures. Damage to your eyes. The rope can burn you. You can get tangled up in the rope. You can dislocate your arm or your leg. It's certain that you will get bruises on your arms. What happens if the rope breaks? Who knows who these people are? Have you any idea how far away from a hospital we are? I don't say it, but yes, you're right. I am thinking it. I don't say anything because I know that you won't have answers for any of my questions. You know that I'm right, really. You've always been a lot more adventurous than me. I know you think I'm boring and safe and always worried about danger and risk. Perhaps you're right. Perhaps I am too boring. I don't know why people do it. I really don't know. I remember when I was a kid, my friend had a bicycle that had no brakes. We used to take his bike without brakes and go down a big hill on it. I think about that old bike so many years ago, and I remember how I felt then. I breathe in, close my eyes, don't think about anything. I jump. I think I'm going forever and wonder when I'll stop. But it feels great. I feel scared and thrilled and alive. Then there's a pull, and I'm going back up again, and yes, it is dangerous, but yes, it is thrilling. But the most exciting, thrilling, wonderful thing of all is seeing your face as I come back up to the bridge.
Story 4. Ex-famous.
Every time Joe Mangold went into his local shop or local cafe or walked down his street, he looked at other people carefully. He wanted to see if people were looking at him. He wanted to see if anyone recognised him. Nowadays, Joe was always sad that the woman in the shop never looked at him, and the waiter in the cafe only nodded hello to him. It was the same everywhere Joe went. Some people said hello to him, but in a way that was entirely normal. Sometimes, when Joe went into a supermarket or was walking along the main street of the city where he lived, people did look at him twice, or they looked at him as if they recognised him. But then they always looked away. Nobody stopped him on the street anymore. Nobody offered to buy him a drink. And nobody now ever asked for his autograph, and nobody ever stopped and asked if they could take a photograph with him. Joe was in a strange situation. 2 years ago, everybody stopped Joe on the street. 2 years ago, it had been impossible for him to go more than a few steps before somebody stopped him and asked if it was really him. And then they wanted an autograph or a photo. When he went into his shop, the woman was always very friendly. When he went into a supermarket, he saw people stopping to point at him. "Is it really him?" they asked, and Joe always stopped and said, "Yes, it's really me." Not anymore. Now, Joe Mangold was ex-famous, a former celebrity, somebody who used to be well known, but no longer was. A lot had changed in 2 years. 2 years ago, his picture was in lots of newspapers and magazines. He wrote a book telling his life story. He appeared on chat shows and quiz shows and radio phone-ins. Even though Joe was not particularly thin or healthy, he made a DVD showing people how to follow his diet and fitness program. It didn't matter. Joe was famous, so anything with his name on it was successful. 2 years ago, Joe Mangold wasn't just Joe Mangold, the regular normal person he was today. 2 years ago, Joe Mangold was Joe from Housemates. Housemates was one of the most successful reality TV shows of all time. Millions and millions of people watched Housemates. Joe had been in the famous house with all the other people. Millions and millions of people watched Joe every morning when he woke up, every day when he ate and chatted with the other people in the house, and even every night when he was asleep. It was true that Joe was the first person to leave the house on Housemates. He was voted out when lots of people telephoned in to say that he should leave the house. It didn't matter. Joe wasn't disappointed. To tell the truth, he didn't like being in the housemate's house much anyway. He didn't like being watched all the time. He didn't like the other people who were in the house very much. But because he was the first person out of the housemate's house, he had more time to enjoy being famous. He made appearances at nightclubs. He opened new supermarkets, and other celebrities invited him to their parties. To tell the truth, Joe didn't like all this much either. He liked being famous, but he didn't like being stopped every 5 minutes. He didn't like not being able to walk down the street without people pointing at him and shouting at him. He liked to be called Joe Mangold, and not Joe from Housemates, which seemed to be his new name. However, being famous was much better than being ex-famous. Now he was no one. He thought about doing something else with his life, but the truth was Joe had never been very good at anything. He had had a few jobs, but was never successful at anything. Housemates had been the only success in his life. He wondered what was worse, being famous or not being famous. Both, he thought, were better than being ex-famous. Now he was nobody. Being ex-famous was a strange life. Nobody wanted Joe anymore to visit their nightclubs or open their supermarkets. Sometimes he saw his DVD in the bargain bins and his book in second-hand shops. In the cafe that morning he sat down as usual with a cup of coffee. Nobody said hello to him. Then he noticed that someone was looking at him. It had been such a long time since anyone had looked at him in that way. The woman came up to him. "Excuse me. I hope you don't mind me asking." "None at all." "Did you used to be Joe from Housemates?" Yes. Actually, I still am Joe, but now I'm usually just called Joe Mangold." "Wow! What a surprise! Joe from Housemates! Incredible!" The woman smiled and looked around her as if she couldn't believe that she was the only person to recognise Joe from Housemates. "What are you doing now?" "Well, nothing much, really." "What a shame," she said. "I thought you were so talented." "Thanks." Joe felt embarrassed. He thought this woman might be mad. "Listen," she continued, "this really is a coincidence meeting you here." "Why?" asked Joe. "I work for a TV production company. and we've just had a brilliant idea. Oh yeah, what's that? We're going to do a reality TV show. There's nothing amazing about that, said Joe. No, but this one will be different. Why? This reality show uses people who have all been on reality shows in the past and puts them all together in a big house. Oh, said Joe. What an interesting idea. I'm not sure that really You'll be great in it, said the woman. It's called X-Famous. Thanks, said Joe. But to tell the truth, I'd prefer just not to be famous at all, thanks.
Story 5. In my father's footsteps.
This is the day. Today's the day. Andy knew it the moment he woke up that morning. This was the day he had to make a decision. The sun came in slowly through the red curtains in his bedroom and made him wake up earlier than he wanted to. It didn't matter. It didn't matter because today was the day. Andy stayed in his bed for some time, thinking about what he should do. It didn't matter. He had lots of time. He'd woken up very early this morning. He lay in his bed thinking about the day that was to come. He lay there thinking about what he should do. The sun, shining in through his red curtains, became stronger and stronger, and eventually he got up, stretched, yawned, and went into the bathroom to get washed. When he was in the bathroom washing his face, he looked at himself in the mirror. "What shall I do today?" he asked his reflection in the mirror. "Should I stay at home like every Saturday? Or should I go?" His reflection didn't reply to him. He looked at his face, his hair, his eyes. He thought about how much he looked like his father. He was now 32 years old. This was the same age that his father was when Andy was born. 32 years old. Was today the right time to make the journey? When Andy's father was 32 years old, he'd already made that journey hundreds of times. For Andy, it was going to be the first time. Andy went back into his bedroom and carefully took his clothes out of his wardrobe. He had made the decision. Yes, his lucky shirt. And then his favourite trousers. He hoped his trousers were going to be lucky trousers too. Then he went into the kitchen to make himself a cup of tea and some toast for breakfast. As he was eating, he thought about other people in other parts of the world who went on journeys like the journey he was going to do today. He was still thinking about it when he went out of his house and walked down the road to the train station. Such an ordinary beginning for such a special day, he thought. This day, he thought, was more than any ordinary journey. Today was a pilgrimage. Today, for Andy, was a day like going to Rome, or sick people to Lourdes, or the people walking to Santiago de Compostela, or even Mecca. Perhaps this was a wicked thought, but that's how he felt. He thought about his father, and he felt how extremely important this day was to him. The train arrived, and he saw a lot of other people getting on the train who were also making the same pilgrimage as he was. Even though he didn't know them, they smiled at each other and nodded their heads at each other in a greeting. They recognized each other even though they didn't know each other. The train started to move out through the town where he grew up. He saw the school where he went when he was little, the park where he played football with his father, and eventually the cemetery where his father was now buried. His father had made this pilgrimage many times, but Andy had never gone with him. Andy hadn't had a good relationship with his father when he was alive, but since he had died a year ago, Andy found himself thinking more and more about his father. Now he was going to make the same pilgrimage that his father made so many times, because he wanted to understand and remember his father. His father had made this pilgrimage, and his father's father before that, and now he was doing it. It was a tradition which he felt happy, no, more than happy. He felt proud to be a part of. Andy smiled again at the other people on the train. One man smiled back at him. "I haven't seen you here before," he said. "Is this your first time?" Yes, it is," replied Andy. "I've been coming here for years," said the man. The train arrived at the station and they all got off. Now there were hundreds, no, more than hundreds. There were thousands of people there. They were all dressed in the same colours. They were all walking in the same direction. "Makes you feel proud, doesn't it?" said the man to Andy. He was right. Andy did feel proud. They walked together out of the station and onto the main road. The place of pilgrimage was there in front of them, only a few hundred metres away now. The thousands of other people became tens of thousands of people, everybody walking in the same direction, everybody together, lots of people singing old songs. Andy remembered his father singing some of those songs. He was happy now that he'd come. He knew he had made the right decision. As the tens of thousands of people walked slowly together along the road, Andy finally understood why his father and his grandfather had made this journey so often. It wasn't the object of the journey that was important. It was the journey itself that was important. It was important to do the same things with lots of other people sometimes, to feel a sense of a shared faith and shared ideals. Andy turned round and smiled at the man beside him. The man smiled back at Andy. Even though these two men didn't know each other, they could see that they had something in common. They were walking in Andy's father's footsteps. They walked in and up the concrete stairs. The noise of the tens of thousands of people was so loud that it was deafening. Andy started to laugh. He had made the right choice this morning. He was happy that he'd come. He could almost feel his father standing there beside him. The teams ran out onto the pitch. There was a huge cheer. The match was about to begin.